Hi folks, in today's video I'm going to be reviewing dyslexic character sheets. So recently I had seen there was a lot of talk of a couple people had made character sheets specifically for people with dyslexia. So I thought, I'm dyslexic, let's review them. I have a fairly mild form that I am able to read, but I read slower than most people do, and the big thing that it affects is numbers for me, but luckily I've gone into my day-to-day life. I don't do complicated math problems every day. Slight disclaimer, different people find different things are helpful for dealing with their dyslexia, as well as some of these character sheets might just be helpful for new people because they're different layouts, or larger text, pictures, things like that. So let's jump right in. This is the first character sheet that I'll be talking about, and I'll make sure to put links down in the comments or in the description below to all of these. This one's available on DriveThruRPG. It's the Dyslexic Assistive Character Sheet, and it is a pay what you want on there. The things I like about this character sheet is it uses a dyslexic-friendly font known as Open Dyslexic. Now, there is some debate within academics whether this is really helpful. It kind of provides a little bit of an assistance for people with dyslexia, not a huge assistance, but every little bit helps, and especially if you're somebody who does find this font helpful, it's great to have your character sheet in that font. Now, the thing with Open Dyslexic is the bottom of all of the letters are thicker, so it helps, especially if you're somebody who flips letters upside down like I do. The reason we figured out that maybe I was dyslexic was I signed a birthday card to my grandma, damn, because I wrote the W upside down and could not tell the difference. Luckily, my grandma thought it was funny. So back to the character sheet. In addition to using a dyslexic-friendly font, this also has a slight different rearrangement from the typical 5th edition, so that it groups a little bit more of like-minded things. I think there's a little bit more space. So a lot of the stuff is all across the top, and then kind of the things that you need more for combat is along the left hand side instead of in the center. So I think it just makes it a little bit easier to find these things. Now, there isn't a spell sheet for this on the drive-thru. I found a similar spell sheet on a Reddit thread. I couldn't quite tell if it was the same person, but the individual who made this because his child is dyslexic and wanted to have something to help them with learning the game. It has both printable and form fillable, which is especially nice if you have bad handwriting. You can just type it in and use whatever font you want. There also is the same layout that uses just a standard font. So if you don't find Open Dyslexic helpful, or you're a non-dyslexic person, you can have the same layout of character sheet, and I think that's especially helpful when you have new players at the table. It makes it easier if they can't find something on their sheet, you can look at yours, find it, and then point it out on theirs. I think that similar layout is very helpful when you do have a mixed group of new and old players. All right, on to the next one. I was only able to print this out in black and white, but this is color. I'll throw a pop-up of the document up here. This is available on Etsy. It is $2.50, but all of the proceeds are supposed to go to a dyslexic charity. So I'm, okay, throwing a couple of bucks their way. The things that I like, this also uses Open Dyslexic, dyslexic-friendly font. I do like the images on this. It helps kind of clue in where different things are, and I think especially if you have a little bit more extreme dyslexia, it might be useful. I know, at least for me, patterns are sometimes, and symbols are a little bit faster for me to identify than necessarily words. It's 2 pages. There's not really space to put a whole lot of equipment, much about feats or abilities, and there's no spell page. So that's a downside to this. I will say that the layout of it is really good because on this first page you have kind of everything you need for general roleplay, exploration phases in D&D, and then once you get to combat, you flip it over to the back, and there's most of the stuff that you're going to need in combat, except for like spells. I also think this is a great sheet for kids. The color version is bright and fun, and you know, it's easy to tell which thing is which thing, because it's like, oh, strength, the muscle, that makes sense. I will say the color on this, I was surprised how well it printed out in black and white. I was a little worried that it wasn't going to read quite as well. It is much better in color than in black and white, so if you have that option, go with that option. Again, I think the big downside to this is just because everything is bigger, and there are all of those illustrations, it takes up quite a lot of space. You'd have to have 2 pieces of paper, and then you still need additional paper for writing out your spells, writing out if you have abilities, stuff like that. So that's kind of the downside to this one. This is my favorite one by far, and I think it's because it kind of combines the best of both of the other 2. While this is not a full redesign of the D&D character sheet, I think it's great both for dyslexic people as well as for just anybody. The use of the symbols is really useful. You may not be able to see it well, so I'll insert a close-up. But I like having the shield, that's your armor class, initiative, exclamation point, HP is a heart. Those are easy to identify. They don't take as much space. There's also a color version of this, and with that, the abilities and then different skills are all color-coded, so that's really helpful. I think that's might be easier to identify than with having the letters next to it, especially if you have somebody who does read slower, has some reading difficulties. And while this doesn't use Open Dyslexic as a font, it uses Comic Sans, which is the kind of one of the reasons of using Comic Sans is it's a more readable font. So for those who make fun of Comic Sans, maybe give it a break. It's easy to read. I find this fairly aesthetically pleasing. It's just nice to look at. And because it is a similar layout with a few tweaks to the regular character sheet, I think if you have a mix of people at your table using this and the standard Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition one, they're not going to run into as much problem trying to help somebody find something if they just can't find it. So I'll put a link to it down in the description below. It was created by a couple of Redditors. One of them is dyslexic, as well as the character sheet that had all of the illustrations, that was created, I believe, with consulting with people who are dyslexic. But this one specifically was created tweaking back and forth to have something that was dyslexic friendly, but also worked for a normal, neurotypical gamer. Okay, so this last one I debated on including because it's not really a dyslexic character sheet. The reason I'm including it is if you Google dyslexic character sheet, this is the first thing that comes up because the web address is dyslexiccharactersheet.com. Now, when I went to the website, I was like, great, this is awesome. Looked at it and was like, other than the title on the top of the page and the address, there's no mention of dyslexia or trying to make character sheets for people who have reading disabilities or who are neuroatypical. No mention of that. What they actually are class-specific character sheets. There's Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, Pathfinder, and Starfinder. Since I'm not familiar with 3.5, I didn't really look much at that. I did print off the Pathfinder one because that's the first RPG that I ever played. So here it is. Now, this kind of enraged me finding this and finding no mention of dyslexia. Nothing about this seems like it was made with people with dyslexia in mind because it doesn't use a dyslexic friendly font. It just uses a standard font. Everything's a little bigger, so I guess that makes it easier to read. And then it's laid out with whatever class you are playing in mind, which is nice, but any class-specific character sheet is going to give you the same thing. So I did reach out to the person who creates them, or at least manages the page, and he acknowledged that he made the page when he didn't know what dyslexia was. His housemate who he worked on projects was dyslexic. And that's problematic. When I tried to ask, like, well, are you planning on doing anything to lean more into the name that you have both on your website and your Patreon? And he just had a bunch of excuses about how, well, class specific makes it easier because you have to read less, which I don't find useful, because for me, if I want to understand my character, I'm going to read the class section in the book. I don't want my character sheet to be 7 pages. This is 7 pages for a rogue, for a cleric. Granted, the last page is just printouts for minifigures. I'm not going to really use that. But if I want my character sheet to be a reference, I want it to be something that I have all of the basic things that I need, and then I always usually do abbreviations of spells, abilities, stuff like that, write down the page number. So if I need to get a much better understanding, I can go back to the rule book. I don't necessarily want the whole rule book sitting in front of me, because guess what? That's going to be more stuff for me to read and try and sort through. So this just frustrated me, because if you're going to take up that domain space and use that name, lean into it. If not, guess what? It's pretty easy to switch domain names, hold on to the domain for like a year, and, have a forwarding address, and then actually describe what you're making, which is class-specific character sheets, not dyslexic character sheets. So yeah, that's problematic. I just wanted to bring it up because it's the first thing you're going to find if you Google search it. And as somebody who's dyslexic, it makes it feel like, and the short conversation I had through Messenger, there's no emotion in that, but it makes it feel like somebody is taking my disability and taking advantage of it. Especially when those things, they're downloaded for free, but especially when I go and see, hey, donate to help me make these things. Hey, here's a Patreon. But when you're not actually making the thing that your title page says. Now, I'm sure that these character sheets are helpful to a lot of people. I can understand what's helpful to a wide bunch is going to also be helpful to a small sliver. But just, it's false advertising. It's false advertising, and the whole thing just pissed me off. So there's my 2 cents. I try and keep it positive. I don't want anybody to go and attack this person or anything. I felt like I needed to share my thoughts, especially because I was so passionate about how I felt. All right, so that's my review of a number of character sheets specifically made for people with dyslexia, and one that's maybe not. If you've used any of these character sheets, I'd love to hear more about them down in the comments below, as well as if you have any advice for other people who are dyslexic or have reading difficulties for how to keep your notes organized and how to, there's a lot of reading and numbers with D&D, but I don't think that that's something that should be a gate for people. It might be a little bit of a hurdle that you have to get over, but we can all reach the finish line at the end. Track! A big thanks to all of our patrons, especially Alicia. If you want to support our channel, you can head over to our Patreon page and check out the perks of being a patron. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you get notified when we post. We have new videos every Tuesday, and we do put out some bonus videos, so make sure to follow us on our social media so you can see all of the things that we do. All right, I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! Notes, notes, notes. Let's pull up my notes.